going from 400 that was predicted for BJP and coming down to say 240 for the BJP or 290 for NDA was something, order of magnitude wrong was between 30 to 40%.
Amit Shah, the Home Minister, on record said you must buy before the 4th of June. Dekna market shoot karegi. The market will shoot up. If anyone else were to put this out in the public domain as a person of influence, they would be booked for front running.
I think on the last show, I mentioned the 295 number and it's landed at 293. So clearly, the place we should be looking for information is the gamblers. They know the actual pulse. Hi, and welcome to episode 18 of the India Dialogue. We're so happy that you're here listening to us. We're excited to do today's episode because we are recording on the 5th of June at 1 p.m. This is the day after the elections have mostly been announced. I believe there's a few seats we're still waiting for results on. And I timestamped this because I want you to know that some things may change by the time this episode comes out, and obviously there may be some changes over the next few days. Of course, today we're going to unpack the election results. Part of it is also unpacking the exit polls and what played out there. Let me introduce my co-hosts who are here, Mitali and Manu. Mitali are you already the acting director of the Reuters Institute or about to be the acting director of the Reuters Institute?
In a couple. Yeah.
And an author and known for her time at CNBC. Manu is an advocate and a lawyer. And now a spokesperson for the fifth biggest political party in the Lok Sabha, the DMK. And I am Ruchir. I'm the CEO at Distributed Energy and the chair of School of Policy and Governance. We unpack this every week. As you've heard us before, we try to cover topics about India and things that matter. Obviously, the election is one of the biggest things that could have taken place in the last few weeks in India. And so we want to dedicate this episode to unpacking the initial set of results that have just started coming out as of yesterday. But does anyone want to start with the exit polls, especially? Manu or Mitali, early thoughts on how the exit polls that were released on the 2nd of June, what your thoughts are?
Yeah. So because this is something I've been quite curious to understand and unpack with you all here. There is a lot of difference, they say, within a day in politics. But, the changes that we saw from 3rd June and 4th June being the day that the results were counted, was, I think, entirely unnecessary. Why? Because, the last phase of polling, I believe, was on the 29th, 31st or 1st of June. So the evening of the 1st of June onwards, exit polls, which were sort of on a ban or a moratorium, was lifted and they were allowed to be broadcasted. Now, again, this is one of the quirks of the model code of conduct. But nevertheless, from the 1st of June evening onwards till 2nd and the 3rd, all media, mainstream and otherwise, were sort of enamored by this game of prediction. What would the numbers be? And because it was such a long drawn out election season, I could understand the general excitement. But what I think is very unfathomable was that most of the polls, and we will see if we can get like a one screenshot of all the polls, indicated between 350 and 400 for the BJP, or you could say at best the NDA alliance. And they were mostly sort of along the lines of what initially the Prime Minister and the Bharatiya Janata Party had sort of used as their primary slogan, which was 400 par, which is to say that they were going to get around 400 seats out of 543. Now, having said that, and having gone through the whole rigmarole of going on television channels and talking about these exit polls, and you have to take them with a grain of salt, but you also go with the hope that they are somewhat right, because these are professionals running these polling agencies. And I was very, very shocked that when even the first trends came out on the morning of the 4th of June, they were nothing close to the exit polls. At best, uh, BJP seems to be around 240 to 243 seats. The alliance in total around 290, just above the halfway mark of 272. And the India alliance, led by the Congress, which was to have had a horrible outing, ended up coming all the way up to again around the 240 to 250 mark. Now, the difference, the order of magnitude difference, is somewhat shocking, I thought. Of course, most exit polls you see, they have a margin. They say, plus 3%, minus 2, plus 2. And, you sort of, we have to give them that little margin for error. But going from 400 that was predicted for BJP and coming down to say 240 for the BJP or 290 for NDA was something, order of magnitude wrong, was between 30 to 40%, right? Or 25 to 33%. Now, that order of magnitude difference is quite shocking. I thought it was entirely, I mean, it in a sense revealed two problems. One is how poorly these polling agencies are actually run. Because when you compare these to other Western jurisdictions, especially the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, which I'm somewhat familiar with, the polling numbers are so close. I mean, this is the pre-poll polling numbers, and exit poll data is almost bang on. I mean, because it's the exit poll, it is literally you talking to people as they walk out of the polling booth, having just cast their vote one way or the other. So the order of magnitude is quite shocking. And secondly, the kind of numbers that most polling agencies, probably bar one or two, gave seemed to match with what the BJP slogans and BJP's aspirations were, and did not reflect the actual numbers on the ground. And during the course of many discussions on television yesterday, I remember one point on India Today. I remember watching where the lead anchor Rajdeep Sardesai telling his viewers that he thought it was strange that the local journalists, the stringer in Uttar Pradesh, in Ayodhya, were all giving him information saying that BJP will lose Ayodhya, and that contest across Uttar Pradesh is very close, saying, it could be 40-40, equally split, whereas the number given by the pollster was, almost a clean sweep in in Uttar Pradesh, 70 plus seats out of 80, right? And it is sad that media agencies across India did not reconcile these numbers, what is coming from their actual person on the ground, in comparison to or in contrast with the numbers given by the polling agency, which they had engaged. So again, this is a huge monetary exercise. Now, I know for a fact that some of these polling agencies, charge a lot, and they keep saying that they have, interviewed or surveyed 10, 20, 30,000 people in India, considering, what is that, 640 million people voted. So, they could even say we've gone and surveyed 1 or 2 million people, and the big TV channels end up paying for that, right? So this has become a huge monetary commercial exercise. It is also has some implications to the stock markets, from what I understand. So maybe that is the point I want to sort of defer to Mitali, if you can sort of take us through what your thoughts are on the were on the exit polls, and also how this sort of led to a great sort of drastic changes in the stock markets the day before and on the day of the counting.
I think I'll say a couple of things, Manu and Ruchir. One, that it's quite an interesting coincidence that this is our 18th episode. 18 is when in India you can go out and vote, and I think this mandate is all about the voter. Forget about a particular party's wins, a particular party's gains, losses. This is a win for the voter, and it's such an affirmation of democracy. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is, sort of, it's easy to say because hindsight is always 2020. But if you've been listening to this podcast and you've been going back to previous conversations that we've been having, I think we have consistently raised what have been issues that have emerged from the ground as very, very real problems. The divisive tone that was taken was a problem on the ground. Jobs were a problem on the ground. High inflation, mehengai, as a lot of North India refers to it, was a problem. So first of all, I think with the exit polls, you're absolutely right, Manu. And if you spoke to, and I'm separating mainstream media from on ground reporters here, or people who were really sort of, working the leather and were out there reporting, the feedback you would keep getting was, there is no wave. Where is the wave? There is support in pockets for this party, but there is no wave. And the kind of numbers that you were pointing to, Manu, in the exit poll would only happen if there was a wave. You would not get that sort of 400 400 par figure if you were not seeing overwhelming support for a particular party and a particular ideology. So I think that was the first lesson. The second one is that you're absolutely right about exit polls, in the sense, I think it's a good time now, and I say this especially for the urban elite, to sit down and pause and just reflect on who this is for. Who is this for? The exit polls are great for TRPs, because it means that there's a sudden bump up in viewership for television news, which honestly is on the wane across the country. It is a huge exercise in, I would, as I was telling you before we started recording, Manu, it's like a sound and light show, right? It's the pyrotechnics. The voting is done, the exhaustion is in the system. Well, look, we're going to call it as this and that. And the third is, where is the accountability? It is a different thing to be a social scientist and to read trends and to read, what the demographic moves may be, and to call it in terms of what you're seeing as a social trend for a country. And it's a different thing to sit back and say, no, we did the numbers, we have a sample size, and we're saying that it's 400. I think it's a good time to ask for accountability. And the biggest one, as you were referring to, Manu, is the money. I mean, 2 weeks before 4th of June counting happened, the Prime Minister, in his many sort of orchestrated interviews and interactions, said, watch the market. It's going to go to new highs with this government. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, on record said, utar chadav hota rehta hai. I'm paraphrasing here. Basically, ups and downs happen in the market, but you must buy before the 4th of June. Dekhna, market shoot karegi. The market will shoot up. Um, I'm just wondering, in our conversation about institutions, what SEBI, which is the central institution that oversees, stock market activity, has to say about this. If anyone else were to put this out in the public domain as a person of influence, they would be booked for front running. Imagine, a Rahul Gandhi or Mr. Stalin or Mamata Banerjee coming out and saying, dump the market on the 3rd of June. I'm telling you, it's going to crash. Imagine the consequences, for any other leader. So this is just complete nonsense, and yeah,
What about if it's not a political figure? What about it was just a celebrity, like let us say a MS Dhoni or a Shah Rukh Khan,
yeah,
and so they're just influential people.
yeah.
Uh, is that sort of permitted? Can the SEBI sort of turn a
It's equally irresponsible, Manu, and they can be booked for front running. It means that you have insider information of certain activity that is going to happen in the market on the 4th of June, and on the basis of that activity, you're saying go and long the market, buy the market, don't short it, don't sell it. If I were to, as MS Dhoni, come out and say, I'm a big believer in the Indian stock market. I invest in stocks. I buy mutual funds. It's perfectly fine to say that, and you can be a believer in the strength of the stock market and the strength of a company's fundamentals. But you're going out and almost giving what is equivalent to a tip to investors. And just look at the money, Manu. On Monday, FIIs bought close to 9,000 crores, which is the foreign investors. Domestic institutional investors, who essentially handle the mutual fund money of all of us as ordinary citizens, also bought the market. They put in about 2,000 crores on more than that. And the next day, look at the way money was dumped. 12,000 crores was sold by the foreign investors. A large amount was sold by the domestic investors. people have lost money here. There are real consequences to this. So I think, along with the election commission, which certainly has some soul searching to do, and other institutions as well, it's a good point to ask SEBI what is going on. Just one indicative basket, Manu, is the Adani stocks. The day before, the Adani stocks surged. The next day, every Adani stock was down between 15 to 17%. These are publicly listed companies. They are not privately held companies. People are investing in them. There are consequences here to making these sort of broad statements around, we saw the exit polls. And then the third thread to ask is, who is the exit poll funded by? Who do they work for? Who do they speak to before they put out these figures? And who do they pass this information on to? I think accountability is sort of the big takeaway of this election, whichever institution you may look at.
There are 2 points I wanted to pick up and point the sort of compass towards Ruchir.
Yeah.
Firstly, the polling agencies. The fact is that our polling agencies come to life suddenly and gain importance and relevance only during election, whereas across the world, some of the major polling agencies seem to do it across the duration of the year, right? Almost every month, I think I'm sure there is a survey or an agency number that tells you about Biden and Trump, as they move towards the poll. It is not only the day before the poll. So I know that is how it is being tracked, because I know, even months before the UK elections, they had exactly told us what is the difference between the Labour and the Conservative parties and so on. So, Ruchir, tell us a little bit about your views on the polling agencies, and also the other point that Mitali was making about the stock markets, right? I mean, it's caused a lot of grief here, and to be honest, I don't know whether it's just the smaller investors or the bigger players who lost money, but I read somewhere that the Adani stocks had a bigger drop than the day they sort of had this Hindenburg report come out and singe them. So, I mean, having seen these two events in almost 6 months or so, how do you view this whole market and how it has moved around? And do you think SEBI is doing enough, or what's the game plan there for SEBI?
Manu, just one quick also, sort of underlining what you said. The stock market yesterday closed at it was its worst performance in 4 years. So, I think numbers matter. So this was the worst performance in 4 years. And not just that, the rupee crashed 0.5%. This is a big move for a currency. It's no small change. So I just wanted to put those two figures there.
I want to start off by saying how active the Satta Bazaars are, the betting markets are. I think on the last show, I mentioned the 295 number and it's landed at 293. So clearly, the place we should be looking for information is the gamblers. They know the actual pulse rather than the pollsters. On the polling, I know a little bit mainly because I've been tracking a lot of the US polling. And polling can be wrong, but the averages are normally accurate. The thing that is really shocking here is how the averages were also wrong. I think everybody leaned towards one direction. And the thing about polling is you do surveys, you talk to people, but then you adjust for certain trends. So, for example, a pollster may have got a survey from 20% more youngsters than that constituency represents. So it is normal for the pollsters to say, hey, the actual demographics are a little bit skewed towards this direction, we should adjust. The problem in this instance is everybody has corrected towards the same direction. And that is really strange because effectively it sounds like, or it looks like from the outside, that there was a certain amount of coordination that took place to get the polling to go a certain way. So I hope that is investigated, both to Mitali and Manu's point, because that is abnormal. And it also creates doubt in the mind of regular viewers to not trust polling. We already had doubts about polling, and we've mentioned that during the podcast. But now this sort of takes it to another level where it really affected people's view and judgment of what the outcome will be, except for the political parties. They definitely, their internal polling was clearly saying something else. And they were coming out and saying, these exit polls don't make sense. We have actual information that says otherwise. So we also need to listen to or figure out the parties themselves are doing their internal polling, because clearly they seem to have been more across the actual pulse of the election. On the SEBI and the Adani piece, I will separate the two issues, because I think the stock market reaction and the Adani reaction are not necessarily related, and I'll explain how. I think was there some coordination behind the stock going up and down, etc.? It's quite possible. I mean, obviously, how coordinated the exit polls were clearly had a reaction to how people bought on Monday. The piece around Adani, which I think is separate, is I think people, at least like generally, the institutional investor, the smart investor knows that Adani's fortunes are quite strongly tied to the Modi government. So the Modi government doing well or not well has implications for the Adani said list of companies. They've had a really deep, long relationship through Gujarat for over 20 years now. So um, the stock there going up and down around the result of BJP doing well or not well, like I don't know whether there was coordination or not behind the scenes there, but I'm not surprised that there is a greater reaction around the Adani stock because of how tied its fortunes, at least we assume, are to the BJP government. So that's sort of my two takes. I have a question, especially Manu, if we can spend a little bit of time on internal polling. Clearly, like you have said on this podcast, you were very clear about the numbers, especially around how well DMK will do in Tamil Nadu, how not so well, how BJP will increase their vote share, which is also played out in Tamil Nadu, but how they will not win a seat. So all of the information you had was fairly accurate. How does the party, DMK, or other parties think about internal polling, and what sort of data do you have access to that us on the outside don't? I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
So the worst kind of polling that anybody can do is internal polling, right? Essentially, what happens is they all want to somehow reflect the master's will and intent or voice and whatever, or thoughts or aspirations. So I think parties have now gotten better at this, and they've realized that there is one channel which comes of information which comes through party cadre. Okay, and that is very reflective of on the ground mood, but that has to be taken with like a bag of salt. Okay, and but then, like I say, I'll qualify that to further say that in a lot of parties, and probably in most, if not all parties, you will have different factions. So let us say we have the Delhi jurisdictional area for party A. There might be one leader Mitali and one leader Ruchir, right? Both sort of competing for that leadership space. At the moment, maybe Ruchir is the leader, but Mitali aspires to one day oust him. So I may, as the leader of this group, may actually be getting two sets of information. Mitali saying it's we are all set to lose, and Ruchir saying otherwise. So again, you sort of balance all of that. But on top of that, you add that bag of salt to say that, okay, this is coming from an internal loyalist, diehard cadre who may not actually speak, complete and unvarnished truth, right? So that's one. The second is to actually go to professional agencies who do this now routinely. But again, the problem there too, I don't see enough of them doing it throughout the year. What parties are now more interested in is to understanding month on month what is Mr. Modi's popularity. Like, let us say there's something happened in January, let us say for sake of example, the Adani Hindenburg issue. Did Mr. Modi's response to the government's response to that improve his popularity or otherwise, right? So that's sort of, we want to see that continuous, I guess, spectrum of views from the people, but which we don't at the moment have. Most polling agencies seem to be only capable of doing it at that particular point of time prior to the election, which is a problem. So something that parties are now starting to do and develop is internal capabilities. Like I said, it's internal, but it should still be professional. It should still be run by people who are qualified, people who understand data, people who understand how to deal with large numbers, people who can contextualize, people who can correct when there is more men polled or less people from one particular religion or community polled, and give them that, right? Something that is sort of also started to really I think help political parties to do across the year surveying is dipstick surveys, which slowly we are bunch of us are trying out to see what is the general mood, what is the general pulse, if not for very quantitative data, at least for qualitative data. So so I think definitely, I think it is improving. Parties do have a sense. I do think the BJP did have a sense very soon after they got into election season that they are not going to get 400, which is why they themselves dialed down on the slogan much more. Maybe that memo did not go out to the polling agencies or the media outlets which published them, because BJP themselves started taking a more sober tone, in the second half of the campaign, right? And they rarely said, I think the T-shirts started just saying Namo again, and nobody, there was no sort of no branding or no creatives around the 400 number, from in the entire second half of the campaign at least. So just going back to
Yeah, Manu, I just wanted to add one point, Ruchi, to your point about these internal surveys also. I mean, let's assess this in a very hard-nosed way. As Manu points out, and as you point out, in Tamil Nadu, they've actually improved vote share, which of course was coming off such a low base. So, from 3 to 11%. In Kerala, for the first time, the BJP has won a seat, right? The same thing you can see in Punjab, where they have actually improved vote share, and there is on ground frustration against AAP, which was given a rousing mandate but has not quite risen to the task, seems to be what is, the feedback when you speak to people in Punjab. Now, the thing is that the BJP has established itself as a pan India party. I think that is another reality that we must sort of look at, which is that it's no longer just a North India bastion. They are beginning to open up these little, spots in other parts of India. Equally, for India Alliance and for the Congress, this has been a remarkable sort of recovery. But the thing is, it's not come off internal surveys. It has come out of good old grassroots connections, which is what we've been talking about. Often people tend to associate local issues with a central decision, but that's where you need to double down on. You have to go back to the people and you have to start sort of building from ground up. I think for the Congress, this is huge in terms of really revitalizing their cadre, but it's also a good time to start rebuilding from the North India belt for sure, but also rebuilding its presence in other parts of India. I mean, look at Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, Richard. It was a sweep for the BJP. Make no mistake, they will look to sort of rebuild and course correct their losses in Uttar Pradesh, which has frankly been quite a slap in the face for seats like Ayodhya. So I think it's less about, what are our internal surveys showing us versus what's working, and going back to grassroots connections is working. And that's what you really need to double down, is my sense.
one
There is
point I
a
want to add, Mitali, to with regard to the BJP's vote share in Tamil Nadu,
Yeah,
something that has been quite properly explained. It's a very simple point. They moved from 3% to 11% now, but they
yeah,
also moved from contesting 6 seats in 2019 to 22 seats now. So
right.
actually,
Okay.
their per capita or per seat vote share hasn't really it's
Has
it,
flattened out.
so so it's again, it's something that is part of this the BJP light and sound show, right, which again is sort of directed from some other place, but sort of played out in the TV channels, that they actually haven't grown like that. Now if they were to contest 40 seats next time, it will definitely go up, but they know, we all know that it is still first past the post system. So even if three parties get 33, 32, 31,
Yeah.
in all likelihood the party with 33 is going to get come first in most seats. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ruchir, you were saying
I,
something.
I had a strategic question. See, if you look at the numbers, ultimately BJP is still the biggest party. They've got 240. Congress is at 899, 98. Like, Forgive me for one or two seats here and there, but they are the big numbers. In some ways, obviously, the India Alliance strategy has paid off because a lot of these local parties, especially Akhilesh Yadav, uh, Manu Yu and the DMK, and so on, some of these regional parties have really delivered for the alliance. But in the bigger picture, like is now Congress, by going through this alliance route, have they actually done themselves a disservice, as in the only real national party that we have in opposition isn't really able to grow as strongly in opposition by relying on these alliances? Could they have done more and better if they had not taken an alliance strategy and gone in a lot of these states on their own? I ask mainly because the narrative at the moment is mainly in reaction to BJP didn't do as well. So look at India Alliance; it's done really well, but actually the difference between the individual parties is huge. So how do you compute that, especially in the alliance and the coalition phase? And Mitali and Manu, I would love to hear both of you in terms of the strategy of the coalition politics.
I think I'll approach it from a different way, Ruchir. First of all, it's look at the sort of process of revival from 2019. I'm not saying again that there's a lot of introspection for Congress as a party to do. There certainly is, but look at the sort of recovery that they have done since 2019. And honestly, again, it's not just the exit pollsters. So many columnists, right up till even last month, felt India is useless. It's not getting anywhere. It's no good. The opposition is useless, and that's the problem. I think that has been punctured. There is strength in working in numbers, and there has been an on ground effect. I mean, we're talking about Tamil Nadu. Look at West Bengal. Yeah, I mean, how many seats were being given to the BJP in the exit poll, and all seats were being fought on the principle of vote for Modi. Right? It wasn't about the individual candidate. It was West Bengal, vote for Modi. And look at the response that they've got there. I actually have a bigger problem with this narrative, as we call it, Ruchir, about I want to turn the question around and ask, what is the problem with coalition politics? If someone were to point me to the problem with coalition politics, I would really like to understand that better. As far as I see it, there's been a problem with this strongman politics, where it doesn't always reflect the thoughts and will and sensitivities of all communities. We've talked in the past about how extremely sort of communal remarks, but also hurtful remarks have been made, whether it is against the people of Tamil Nadu, or whether it is against the Muslim community, or whether it was Punjab, where you started terming people as Khalistanis. If you go back in history and you look at this purely from an economic lens, every coalition government has actually made some of the most laudatory decisions, whether it was a tax regime change in income taxes and corporate taxes by P. Chidambaram, whether it was the Manmohan Singh government that came out with what is frankly the backbone of rural India today, which is Narega, the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, whether it was, previous governments such as the one led by P.V. Narasimha Rao, Deva Gowda, I already mentioned. Coalition politics work well at an economic level. They work well for people, so I think there's no shame in sort of working together. It's representative, which is what we should be, rather than this pyramid structure where one person, one plus, this 1+1 combination of prime minister plus home minister will tell you like it is. But I'd love to hear from both of you as well.
I just want to react to that, then Manu can have a go. I think the thing, obviously, that we've struggled with is the lack of a clear alternative to Modi. I actually think the current election result, if you remove the exit polls from the equation, because the exit polls sort of built expectations and then ruined them, so the kind of reactions we're getting are sort of they're distorted. But if you just look at practically how this has played out, like Modi and the BJP are now the first government since Nehru to take a third term. And I partly think it's because of two reasons. One, they are a national party, and second, is we haven't had a clear alternative national leadership. And I think that matters, especially in terms of, in a federal structure, in my head at least, there is this idea that when you have clear mandates, you're able to move on a bunch of policies faster. I agree with you, Mitali, 100%. One of the best things about the election result here is that we did need a check on this party, and this is fabulous that rather than them bulldozing things through, now we actually, like coalition, will help manage that, and that's what the country needed. So in some ways, the democracy has really worked. So I'm in favor of that. But what I worry about is for us to continue to thrive as a democracy, having sort of clear leadership in like clear leadership at a national level can actually help um, um, like have the back and forth between the governments, which I worry does not happen, and we get stuck in constant negotiation around coalitions. Manu, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there's a few very interesting threads, but I want to sort of pick on a couple initially, around coalition politics. See, essentially, what we look for from an election is the mandate. Now, if the mandate is for brute majority, like it was in 1984, and in, of course, in 1991 for the Congress, and in 2019 for the BJP, then that is what the people have asked for, and that is what people have deserved in a way. And then what happens is, how do you keep a government, a very strong executive arm, in check? So for that, the two other branches, the legislature and the judiciary, and of course the media, right? These are a sort of where we hope that there is some check and balance. But the legislature, by and large, has lost its importance in that sense in India. When you compare this to a United States, considering we do have an executive branch, but by and large, the executive controls the legislature because of the whip. Now, moving one step forward, the judiciary and media, I think, have had, some may say, a great fall in terms of how we expected them to be a counterforce or a check on the government's excesses over the last 5 years. So really, these are the sort of what you expect when you have a brute majority, a single party majority in government. Now, whenever I talk about single party majority, I usually see people who like the, what I would call, the China model of democracy really light up, right? They're like, no, government should be able to do what they want. Once there's a government, they have absolute legitimacy to go to any extent under the name of progress, or under the sort of aspiration of development and so on. But our system just was not, I think, designed for that. I mean, you can blame the constitution, or you can sort of give credit to it, whichever way you see it. But ours was a more of a check and balance democracy in that sense. So therefore, for me, I think it really does not, I think, matter whether it is a single majority party government or a coalition government. Either way, I feel that, or I see that there is a particular way that governments are formed. And now, today, the fact is that it is no longer a Modi government, right? In fact, for the first time, somebody remarked in the BJP office during the post-election result meeting or rally. For the first time, they said NDA Zindabad. Usually, it was Modi Sarkar, Modi guarantee, and so on. So now, of course, I think that is the reality, that an NDA government, is what it has to be now called, right? And this is completely new territory for Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah, because they've never run a coalition government in the state or the union. So this is the first time they will have to some extent, I think, make those concessions. Now, of course, in the 2014 government, there were ministers from other parties, namely Shiromani Akali Dal, if I remember correctly. Harsimrat Kaur Badal was a minister, and maybe one or two others. But definitely now there is a reliance, there is a dependence, and definitely the fact remains that BJP has been cut down from 303 in 2019 to 240 something, right? So what is that? That is 20% of their sort of assets have been sort of taken away, which is again, I think, huge. And it tells you a little bit about the nature of elections. Maybe, it just reflects the fact 5 years is a long time and so much has changed that people have decided to take off 20%. And look at Congress. They started at 42, 43 in 2019, and they are, I think, close to 100 now. So they have doubled. They have gained, more than 140% or 150%.
I'm interrupting for only one quick question, which is that the Congress hasn't conceded yet. Do you think they believe that there is a chance they'll form government? I wanted to get that in because I'm curious about what you think right now.
So I think Yogendra Yadav, when speaking to a channel yesterday, explained the difference between getting a mandate and forming the government, right? So the mandate is when all the election certificates are given to all the MPs. So 543 MPs have election certificate. That's the mandate. Now, formation of government is one step further, which is that there is a test. Actually, the test is, I think, best articulated in S.R. Bommai versus Union of India, Supreme Court case from 1993 or 1994, where it says, this is how you go about forming a government. One is, first, check if there is a single majority party, which was like the case in 2019. If that is the case, then the governor in the state or the president in the union invites that leader of that party to form government. Now, that's not the case now. Second is you check whether there is a pre-poll alliance. Now here, this would come under the second category. There is a pre-poll alliance with JDU and with the TDP. Now what then happens is they're given a chance to form the government, and for that they'll either have to show to the president letters of support, or the president may say, okay, go and get into Lok Sabha, have a a temporary speaker, and do a floor test, right? Now, again, this will require them to come and vote in Parliament to say that there is trust in choosing so and so as Prime Minister, as the leader of the Parliament. Now, if that is not the case, then the third is when you go for post-poll alliance. Let's say they drop TDP and incorporate a different party, for sake of argument. Then that would be a post-poll, which is also possible. But this will all have to be tested. Option 2 and option 3 will have to be tested on the floor of the Parliament. Now, until that is done, BJP yet has not formed government, right? That is the legal process, the journey that needs to be undertaken. Now, a lot of them, I think, skipped those parts and just assumed it is a Modi 3.0 Sarkar, which it might be, which it may not be, because letters of support are not given unconditionally, Ruchir, you know that. Of course, I'm going to say, hey, what am I going to get in return, right? What is my so-called pound of flesh? What are you going to give for me, my state, my people, my party, etc.? So until those negotiations are done, until those letters of support are given to the president, and until those letters of support are reflected on the floor of the Parliament, no government is formed. So I think some of them, perhaps in that, with the momentum they built with the 400 par exit poll, were in a hurry to sort of say that the government is there, Modi is there, Congress is a robust opposition. No, none of it is true. All of that, there is a little while to go. We'll have to see how all of that plays out, one. And secondly, it is a fact that BJP stands in pole position today. They are the single largest party with 240. So even all of the India Alliance put together, at the moment, they are around 230-40 mark. Now, what I would do if I was in that position, in the India Alliance position, is I would wait to see what the person in the pole position is doing, what is their first move, and then make a call. So it might well be sort of waiting and watching. And it is also a matter of negotiations. I want to see what somebody is offering you before I know what I can offer you to better that offer, right? So none of this is now known. I'm sure there have been back channels that have been going on since yesterday. So since the 4th of June onwards, since the earliest trends came out. So, and I'm sure nothing is over until it actually is over. The only other point I want to make is how, I've already mentioned that this is now no longer a Modi Sarkar or a Modi government. It is now an NDA government, an NDA Sarkar, which means it is a coalition government, which means it will, by logic, be a more federal government, because it will now have to take care of two very important states, assuming Nitish and Naidu, which is Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. and it's so interesting. Both these states are the ones that have been promised special status, right? Because of the bifurcation, and Bihar too. And there's been interesting sort of parlays and disputes between the BJP and Nitish Kumar about the special status. So let us see how that is played out. Another key point is delimitation. If there was a single majority BJP party government again, then delimitation would have been a foregone conclusion. One nation, one election could have been a foregone conclusion. Now, I will not say any of that is for sure now, right? So it means they have to come to the table, sit with the coalition allies, maybe even build some support in people who are neutral, not allied with the India alliance, or people in the India alliance who may want to have a chat and support them on an issue based basis, and so on. So it does make it more representative, as Mitali was saying. It means it is more representative. I think it's all the more important considering the kind of institutional capture we have seen over the last 5 years. So-called independent neutral bodies, Election Commission of India, State Bank of India, SEBI. I don't even have to mention the Enforcement Directorate and Income Tax Department, but I will, right? The fact is, with all these institutions which should have been performed, functioned independently, neutrally, have been captured. So to actually liberate them from that capture may happen now. Chandrababu Naidu was arrested 6 months ago, and according to him, he was hounded and unnecessarily thrown into jail. But he understands the power, or the he understands what it means to be at the receiving end of authority and wrongful authority. So I think all of that taken into account, this is the mandate. The mandate is not for a Modi led single party majority government. And whether that is what the people have asked, that is what the people have wanted, and that is what they have gotten. So I think beyond that, I don't see this as one way good or bad, because ultimately what people want on the ground has nothing to do with what the markets tell us is good. So I think they're two mutually distinct and separate entities.
Ruchir, I just want to say, and I'll try and keep it brief because I know otherwise we can keep chatting.
Yeah.
And this line sort of comes back to me because we talked about it in our podcast about how the BJP sort of, they set the goal, and then everyone else runs behind it, and they keep switching it up. They switch the whole marketing mechanism. Now it's electoral bonds, now it's not. Now it's Ayodhya, now it's not. And I just want to say that I think it's a lesson not just to the BJP but for any political party that you can't always be too smart by half. If you were to just go back and connect the dots, and I'm thinking about this because I wrote a piece, post the elections. I think a couple of things stand out. Number one, the demonetization decision that happened by this government, this leader, right? The kind of blow that it dealt to the MSME sector that was followed up by a very, very haphazard introduction of GST. I think it completely hemorrhaged the availability of jobs and literally the grease that moves the Indian economy, Ruchir, and they have not come back from there, which means that we have had a jobs problem, which means that the MSME space has been struggling, which means that a very, very large sort of, almost a plank that kind of holds things together for the Indian economy, and certainly the unstructured part of it really came apart. And I think that stress has been showing for years now. The second one is COVID, where it happened, and we almost behaved like life just carried on. But guess what? Life did not carry on, because for all of us privileged elites, we moved into our houses and put up videos about how we're doing all our household tasks ourselves. But as we did that, there were swaths of migrant laborers moving across the length and breadth of this country with no support. What did they do? They all went back to their villages, which meant that jobs from the agricultural side started rising, which is not as productive as being in the manufacturing sector, which meant there was more stress on one piece of farmland, which is why you are seeing in rural India, there has been a very, very clear shift away from the BJP. And that stress has come back to bite, the party. And people are not happy, and that is the other truth. The third one is with regards to farmers. You can keep, sort of vilifying them. You can put up the concrete boulders, and you can put up the barbed wires, and you can call them what you will. But I think this was a huge vote by the farmers. You can see it in Maharashtra, and there is certainly anger in Punjab about the way things were carried out, and the way they were almost targeted. And the fourth one I would say is communalism. I think, and I want to do a shout out to some of these reporters: Sarvapriya Sangwan from the BBC, Amit Terotkar from Frontline. People who were doing the traditional reporting and going out were picking up what others were talking about. And there were interviews with people in Uttar Pradesh saying, I don't recognize this state. This is not my state. This is not how I want to live. This is not how I want to be around another community. It's not working for me. And I think all these things, you can keep flicking them away and saying, it's a non-issue, but these things add up, and I think they did add up. And I think, if the party has humility, or as any party should, they should really sit down and introspect about a lot of how things went wrong on many of these key parameters. Demonetization was a mistake. Mishandling of COVID was a mistake. Driving wedges between communities is a mistake. And targeting farmers is a mistake in India.
We can keep going, and obviously the results will take a lot of time to unpack. There's so many things, right? Obviously, the Ayodhya result. There's what happened in Uttar Pradesh more generally. There's Andhra Pradesh. There's Odisha. We will come back and talk more about this. This is not the only episode we do on the results. Obviously, a lot of things should change also over in the next few weeks. So I imagine that we will continue to have a fair bit to unpack here. For now, just to make sure that we keep the conversation concise, we should wrap it up here. And Mitali or Manu, do you have anything else you want to bring up before we wrap up? No?
No, I think
Go ahead, Manu.
It's been, it's been, I think, an interesting election. It's been a long drawn out election. And I think, let me begin, if I may, with my Have You Heard, which is from the election. I just wanted to, talk about something. I mean, Mitali, towards the end of her last piece, explained, that you cannot do all of this at the expense of farmers, at the expense of women, and so on. But I think, the young people really, I feel, spoke in these elections. I don't have any data yet of how many young people voted and which way they voted. I feel that will be very interesting to see. But I wanted to pick up on something, and we, wanted to always see more young people in politics. In 1998, so roughly, about 40 years ago, the average age of a Lok Sabha member of parliament was 46 years. And in 2019, the last election for which we have data, the average age of a Lok Sabha member of parliament was 54. So actually, it's going the other way, not, becoming younger in that sense, right? So in that context, I thought it was fascinating to see yesterday, at least as far as I could tell, 4 25-year-olds won their respective seats and now will become members of parliament. Why 25? Because that is the minimum age that you can to contest. So 18 is the age to vote and 25 is the age to contest in a Lok Sabha election. So the four of them, two of them are from Uttar Pradesh. I believe they are both from the Samajwadi Party, Pushpendra Saroj and Priya Saroj. One is Shambhavi Chowdhury from Bihar, representing the JDU, Janata Dal United. And the last one is Sanjana Jadhav, representing the Congress from Rajasthan. Again, very interesting. The first three seem to have, deep familial roots in politics, like son or daughter of sitting minister, sitting MP, or sitting MLA, and so on. The last one, Sanjana Jadhav, very interesting. She seems to have lost the last MLA election by 400 votes. She's 25 years, mother of two children. Husband is a police constable, so clearly seems to hail from a very disadvantaged community, and has done extremely well and winning this tough seat for Congress in Rajasthan. So I think whichever way it goes, I think having younger people in parliament can only be a better thing. So that was my Have You Heard. Mitali, do you want to go next?
I think it's such a cool have you heard, Manu, because it's sort of reflective of how the three of us met, which is the Australia India Youth Dialogue. So, if anyone believes in the power of youth, the three of us do. I don't have a big have you heard. I think um, I would go back to music, which I love. And I think all of yesterday, I was really tripping on A.R. Rahman. I think he's so reflective of everything that is amazing about India and its syncretism and its music and culture. And I was hearing the whole soundtrack of Swades, which is another fantastic film, back to back. I loved that. And I hope we go back to doing that, building art and culture that has space for many points of view rather than just one.
That's quite
Fantastic. Thank you,
special,
Mitali. Ruchir, you do yours?
Yeah, I was just thinking about all the
Yeah.
quirks of the election. Thankfully, Prajwal Revanna lost. Interestingly, BJP won their first seat in Kerala. Also, I was thinking about the voter turnout from Northeast. It's quite amazing. Most of the states in the Northeast turn out at over 75%, whereas the rest of the country is not as engaged. So they have more India than the rest of the country. Anyway, um, uh, the weirdest have you heard is not related to election. It's did you know that the Portuguese divorce rates are at 94%? I found out very recently. And I don't understand why. And I spoke to a few people about it. And they can mainly come up with two primary reasons. Reason number one is less Portuguese people are getting married. So as a result, that the few who are unhappy about it. And the second is
Mm,
apparently the barrier to a divorce has been really reduced dramatically in Portugal, in that, a lot of countries have these
mm,
various rules around. You must have a cool down period of 1 year. You must go through a certain process. Apparently, in Portugal, you don't have a lot of these barriers. So when people want out, they actually get an out right away. So that was a really strange one for me. I hadn't even, because India is such a low divorce rate. Like, I think the number is maybe 1 or 2% or even lower. That the 94% really shocked me. It's not our culture, right? That was my have you heard. Anyway, that's it for this week, episode 18. Obviously, unpacking election in a population of 1.4 billion with 543 people constituency requires a lot more time. But we want to respect your time and try and do it over a few episodes. So we will be back talking more about the election results as the government forms. Thank you for listening this far. If you want to find us, please give us feedback. The India Dialogue podcast is at indiadialoguepodcast@gmail.com. We love listening from you. We get a few messages every week, and we're grateful that you do send us those messages and emails. You can also find us on Twitter, on x.com, TID_podcast, or on YouTube at India Dialogue Podcast channel. Mitali is Mitali Live on X. Manu is Manu Raj1983. I am Ruchir_P on x.com. Thank you again for listening, and see you again next week. Bye.